my initial opportunity to teach at Rare Book School has an interesting background story, because I got to know Michael Suarez in the early 2000s when he was a co-editor working on co-editing the Oxford Companion to the book, and I had been invited to participate as a associate editor for East Asia and Southeast Asia. And I got to know him at that time. I also admired the fact that he was moving away from the kind of Eurocentric view that dominated the subject, and what was including book histories from all parts of the world. And so I was very eager to work with him, and we had a good relationship. And then a few years passed. I was working at Princeton, and we met actually sort of just bumped into each other at the New York Antiquarian Book Fair in 2013. And that was after he had been appointed the director at RBS in 2009. So we talked about his new appointment, and in the middle of our conversation, he smiled and said, "What would you say if we asked you to teach a course on the history of the book in China at RBS?" And I paused for a minute and smiled back, and I said, "I guess I'd say, what took you so long?" And so we had a good laugh at that. And then, but Michael immediately started making concrete proposals. And I told him that it was coincidentally interesting that after I had concluded the Chinese International Union Catalog of Chinese Rare Books, which was an online database catalog that I headed as editorial director for 20 years at Princeton. After that closed in the end of 2011, the East Asian Studies Department invited me to teach a course, a graduate seminar on the history of the book in China. So I was able to tell him that I had just in fact completed my first semester of teaching that course at Princeton, and so I was really attuned to the idea of it. And Michael at first said that since RBS didn't have adequate materials for teaching the subject among their large collection of teaching materials and books, he would propose to Princeton and negotiate with them for me to teach the course, the RBS course at Princeton, in the fall of 2013. We were speaking in the spring of 2013. And fortunately, I had my wits about me, and I protested and said that, in fact, my concern was that my subject, the history of the book in China, had been severely marginalized by the powers that be already, and by teaching the course at an isolated location, off-season, was only reinforcing the problem that I saw. So that I said, in fact, I really would like to do it, but I would almost insist that we do it at Charlottesville, where my students and I and the subject matter of our course could be intermingled with the normal rare book history courses, and we could be integrated with the kinds of people who meet there in the summer for their extensive program. And I said, in fact, I have had a significant collection of Chinese and East Asian rare books and other teaching materials that I had even at Princeton, which has a extraordinary and superior East Asian library, I had to use because of the special nature of some of the material. So I said, given that fact, I think I could put together enough teaching materials and of my own and transport them to Charlottesville for teaching every summer, which I did and proceeded to do from 2014 until last year, when happily it was possible for me to donate my entire teaching collection to RBS, where it is now. I was interested in having my rare book collection as well as my teaching collection go to University of Virginia and RBS, I guess primarily because I have always been so inspired by RBS, so RBS was in a way the motive force. But on the other hand, I had had contact with the East Asian Studies Department at the University of Virginia previously, and it's a moderate collection, and they certainly didn't have any rare books to speak of, but which was a good reason, because if my books went to Princeton or Harvard, there would be duplication of certain material and they wouldn't make as much of an impact. And it seemed to me that where there was sort of a blank slate, it was more meaningful. And furthermore, even my rare book collection after 50 years of collecting had gone through a number of changes, and it had become more and more focused on the material texts and the sort of things that are important for teaching the history of the book. So even among the rare books, there were a lot of examples that balanced very well with the kinds of examples that were in the teaching collection to go to RBS. So it seemed complementary to have it go there. And I was very glad that it worked out. And I think there will be a lot of work to continue to improve and develop the collections. RBS is significant in the field of printing history and book history because of its wide scope. Other institutions and organizations often have a narrower scope, so that wide scope is significant. The quality and concentration of the teaching is unparalleled. I mean, when I teach there for 30 hours, it's almost identical with the 36-hour semester seminar that I teach at Princeton, so that it means that everything is very concentrated, and yet there's no compromise in quality. And then lastly, I think that because I'm particularly concerned about developing comparative studies and comparative research on these subjects, both printing history and the history of the book, I think RBS provides a unique venue for that opportunity also. So those are things that I think make RBS particularly well situated to do that. The faculty of certainly are the creme de la creme in their fields. And as far as students, the students apply competitively to get into the classes. And I'm always amazed by the applications that I get to read, because the students come from highly diverse backgrounds. Many of them are really well established professionals in their own fields, and they're all highly motivated. That's one thing about the class that I always point out to people, is you never have to worry that someone won't be paying attention, because they come with such a high level of motivation. And there's a great variety too. So I mean, I would say across the board through this decade, I've had academics, professors, graduate students, librarians, museum curators, including administrators, who said they wanted to learn if they had Asian book collections that they were responsible for. They wanted to learn more about it. So they were even not necessarily the curators. Conservators have been a big part of my classes, archivists, artists, bookbinders who do special work and want to become familiar with the East Asian praxis, and of course there's every sort of collector that you can imagine, bibliophiles. It's always a very interesting group, and as I said, there's never a need to prompt them to pay attention, because they came for that purpose. So it's the personal contacts that really stand out among my memories.